Welcome. We are going to be modeling synapses under the effect of LSD. To start off, a synapse is where two neurons meet so that a neurotransmitter can move between them and make the neuron that is receiving the neurotransmitters fire. Now that probably sounds like a bunch of sciencey stuff, but it actually isn't super complicated if you boil it down to its most basic form. Let's start with the neurotransmitter. Neurotransmitters are proteins in the neuron contained in vesicles that are the actual medium in which two neurons communicate. The other part includes the presynaptic neuron, or the one that has neurotransmitters in it, and it sends it out to the synaptic cleft, which is just the gap between the two neurons, so that it can be received by the receptors that are attached to the postsynaptic neuron. And when they bond to it, it causes them to fire or shoot an electrical signal to the other end of the neuron, causing it to release more neurotransmitters. Also, this is a useful tool we will need later, but I'm going to try to find what a transporter or a reuptake pump is to make it easier for all intents and purposes to the way a neurotransmitter works and get back into the neuron, reabsorb. And it's how the neurotransmitters get back into the neuron and they're reabsorbed into the vesicles. Synapses connect neurons in the brain to neurons in the rest of the body, and to the body to the brain, or even just the brain to brain. They're essentially how different neurons communicate. They take place in the central nervous system to allow communication between neurons. LSD, or lysergic acid diethylamide, is a psychedelic that affects both dopamine and serotonin receptors. But we are only going to be talking about serotonin receptors today. It causes you to perceive things that aren't there and makes you unresponsive and easily startled. LSD chemically resembles serotonin and binds with the receptors. LSD can cause some receptors to inhibit and some to excite the neuron. This is one of the reasons as to why LSD has such complex effects. LSD also lasts for a really, really long time, and which is part of the reason why people use it recreationally and why such small doses have such large effects. LSD has a wild history and was used for therapy in 1950 and early 1960s with good results. It was primarily used to treat alcoholism and other mental health issues because of its ability to condense months of therapy into a single, all-day, intensive session of self-discovery. In my opinion, there is no better way to cure alcoholism than Jesus riding a dragon with a birthday hat on telling you to stop drinking. It has been making efforts to reemerge as a therapeutic drug, but it still remains incredibly illegal and on the same level as meth and cocaine, and therefore incredibly difficult to study and make strides in research without hitting a brick wall and having to jump through some hoops to get around it. LSD was banned largely over fear, but the fear was warranted to at least an extent. The drug is so active that it causes the neuron to fire so much that the neuron gets overstimulated, and some of the sectors decide to retreat into the neuron to stop the high. This is also what causes tolerance. Under normal conditions, a synapse functions like this. So the neurotransmitters start in the vesicles inside the presynaptic neuron that bind with the membrane of the axon terminal, releasing neurotransmitters into the synaptic cleft. The neurotransmitters eventually find their way to the receptor and bind with them. Then they return to the presynaptic axon terminal through transporters due to a very complicated process of neurochemistry that I tried and failed to understand. But when LSD is added to the synaptic cleft, it disguises itself as serotonin, and while it might take longer than the serotonin, it binds the receptors and then pulls part of the receptor over itself, making a lid to keep it in place. And this is what causes the long-lasting effects. It doesn't care if the brain has no more serotonin left, it just causes it to fire, whether the brain wants to release serotonin or not. The serotonin gets sucked up by all the transporters in the presynaptic neuron. The LSD doesn't, because of the lid. You may also be wondering how the actual process of tolerance works. It starts when LSD causes the neuron to fire over and over again until it says enough and decides to protect its neuron from further overstimulation by deconstructing the receptors and taking the LSD with it so that the high stops and the neurons can go back to normal, showing just how smart and versatile your body is. As you can see, LSD is a very powerful drug and interesting drug that affects the receptors in a weird and wacky way. That causes a slew of effects that make learning about this drug really interesting. Also, PSA, don't take LSD. I do not endorse the use of LSD in any way. Okay, bye. Don't take LSD.